Good morning. We're going to start now. Thank you all for being here. My name is Meenakshi. I'm the Deputy Director of Asia for Human Rights Watch, and I'm very honored to be here with my fellow speakers. Also delighted to be here because this is an amazing time for Bangladesh. 1 year ago, we could not have imagined that we would be talking about the things that we're going to be talking about today, to no small part because of the two women who are sitting next to me. So before we start, we're actually going to have a video from Michael Chakma. For many of you over here, especially with the working group on disappearances, you would know about Michael Chakma's case. He disappeared. His family even held his burial. And then he is one of the 3 people that was released from secret detention after the Sheikh Hasina government fell. From the, yes. So
সংগত ইউনাইটেড পিপলস ডেমোক্রেটিক ফ্রন্ট ইউপিডিএফ আমাকে 2019 সালের 9 এপ্রিল ঢাকার কল্যাণপুর থেকে একদল সাদা পোশাকের লোক তুলে নিয়ে যায়। এরপর দীর্ঘ 5 বছর 3 মাস ধরে তথাকথিত আয়নাগর নামক জঘন্য ভয়ঙ্কর এক বন্দিশালায় আমাকে আটকে রাখে। গত 5 আগস্ট ছাত্র জনতার গণ অভ্যুত্থানের পর শেখ হাসিনার নেতৃত্বে ফ্যাসিস্ট সরকারের পতন হলে এর 2 দিন পর 7 আগস্ট আমাকে তারা মুক্তি দেয়। এই যে 5টা বছর আমি ওখানে যে বন্দি অবস্থায় ছিলাম, সেই অবস্থার বর্ণনা দেওয়ার মতো ভাষা আমার নেই। যে পরিবেশটা এটুকু বলা যায় যে 5 বছর ছিল আমার নরক জীবন, যা শুধু শ্বাস নিয়ে শ্বাস প্রশ্বাস নিয়ে বেঁচে থাকা, এটা বেঁচে থাকা বলা যায় না আসলে। পরিবেশটা ছিল এমন, যেটা খুব ভয়ঙ্কর এক পরিবেশ, ভীতিকর এক পরিবেশ, যেখানে আলো বাতাস প্রবেশের কোনো সুযোগ নাই। কোনো ছোট্ট একটা জায়গা, 7 ফিট বাই 11 ফিটের একটা ছোট্ট একটা রুম। ওই রুমে 24টা ঘন্টা তারা সেখানে তালা মেরে আটকে রাখে। বাইরে বাইরে যাওয়ার যেমন সুযোগ নাই, বাইরের থেকে কোনো লোক এসে কথা বলারও সুযোগ নাই। সারাদিন চুপচাপ করে বসে থাকা, আর সেখানে তারা ঠিকমতো ঘুমাতে দেয় না। ঘুমানোর সময় তারা অত্যাচার চালায় যেন আমরা ঘুম না যেতে পারি। ওই তালা দিয়ে তারা বাড়ি মারে, তারা ওই দরজায় বাড়ি মারে, উচ্চ শব্দ করে। সেখানে অনেক উচ্চ শব্দের ফ্যান আছে, যে ফ্যান ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে ব্যবহার করা হয়, এরকম উচ্চ শব্দের ফ্যান চালায়, যা বিকট শব্দ। ওই 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 ফ্যান সারা 24 ঘন্টা চালু রাখে। তারা কোনো ঘুমানোর সময় কখনো অন অফ যখন তারা করে, আরো ঘুম ভেঙে যায়, ঘুম হয় না, এরকম তারা অবস্থা সেখানে রাখে। আরো এছাড়াও তারা অনেক রকমের অত্যাচার সেখানে তারা চালায়, মানসিক অত্যাচার চালায়। তো প্রতিবাদ করলে, যদি কোনো কথা বললে, তারা লাঠি হাতে আছে, মারধর করার ভয় দেখায়, উল্টো করে টাঙিয়ে রাখার ভয় দেখায়। এরকম তারা অনেক রকমের অত্যাচার তারা সেখানে, মানসিক অত্যাচার তারা সেখানে ক্রমাগত করে যায়। খাবার দিয়ে অত্যাচার করে, খাবার ঠিক মতো কখনো দিলেও খাওয়ার উপযোগী থাকে না, খাওয়া যায় না। অনেক বেশি জাল করে, যা খাওয়া যায় না, মুখে দেওয়া যায় না, এমন জাল তারা করে। জাল হয়েছে যদি বললে তারা আরো বেশি জাল করে। ঠিক এরকম কোনো লবণ দেয় না তরকারিতে, কোনো ধরনের বাসি খাবার দেয়। তো এরকম তারা এভাবে সেখানে একটা মানসিক যন্ত্রণার মধ্যে রাখে। তারা অবশ্য আমাকে শারীরিকভাবে নির্যাতন করেনি। সেখানে জিজ্ঞাসাবাদ আমাকে যে করেছিল, তখন তারা আমাকে মেরে ফেলার ভয় দেখিয়েছিল। আমাকে আহ 30 বছর পর্যন্ত ওখানে বন্দি করে রাখার ভয় দেখিয়েছিল। আমি প্রতিদিন ভাবতাম বলে আজকে আমার শেষ দিন, মানে আমি ওখান থেকে বের হয়ে আসতে পারবো এরকম আমি চিন্তাই করতে পারিনি। আমি সবসময় ভাবতাম হয়তো আজকে আমার শেষ দিন, তারা আজকে আমাকে মেরে ফেলবে, ঠিক এরকমই আমার ইয়ে থাকতো, মানে সেরকম চিন্তা আমি করতাম। সবসময় তো ভয়াত্মক ভয়ের মধ্যে আমি ছিলাম, মানে কখন যে আমাকে এখান থেকে নিয়ে গিয়ে মেরে ফেলে, এরকম অবস্থা দিন কাটাতে হতো ওখানে। যে আমার পরিবারও জানতো না যে আমার কি হয়েছে, আমি কিভাবে কোথায় কিভাবে আছি, আদৌ বেঁচে আছি কিনা আমি জানতাম না তাদের পরিবারের খবর। একটা পর্যায়ে আমার পরিবার আমার বেশি ফিরে আসার আশা ছেড়ে দিয়ে আমার শেষকৃত্য তারা করে দিয়েছে। আহ আমার বাবাও মারা গেছে আমার এক নিখোঁজ হওয়ার 1 বছর পর। সব মিলিয়ে মানে আমি যেমন কষ্টে ছিলাম, ঠিক আমার পরিবারও অবর্ণনীয় অসহনীয় কষ্টের মধ্যে তারা গিয়েছিল, সাফার করেছিল। তো আহ এই এই ভীতিকর অবস্থা থেকে মুখ আমি হয়তোবা ফিরে আসতে পারতাম না যদি দেশে একটা এরকম বড় পরিবর্তন না হতো, যদি হাসিনার মতো একটা অত্যাচারী সরকারের পতন না ঘটতো, ফ্যাসিস্ট সরকারের পতন না ঘটতো, হয়তো আমার ওখানে ফিরে আসা সম্ভব হতো না। আর এটাও ঠিক যে আমার নিখোঁজ হওয়ার পর দেশে বিদেশে দেশের মানবাধিকার কর্মী, সচেতন রাজনৈতিক কর্মী এবং আপামর জনতা যদি আমার মুক্তির দাবি না জানাতো, এবং দেশের বাইরেও আন্তর্জাতিক মানবাধিকার সংগঠন সহ আহ, আহ, বিভিন্ন সংগঠন আমার মুক্তির দাবিতে সোচ্চার না হলে কিন্তু আসলে আমাকে তারা মেরে ফেলতো, সেটা আমার দৃঢ় বিশ্বাস। তো 7 তারিখ যেদিন তারা আমাকে ছেড়ে দিয়েছিল, সেদিনও আমি ভেবেছিলাম যে হয়তো আমাকে মেরে ফেলার জন্য তারা আমাকে নিয়ে যাচ্ছে। প্রতিটি ক্ষণ প্রতিটি মুহূর্ত আমি মৃত্যুর প্রহর আমি গুনে গুনে আমি সারা রাস্তা আমি গিয়েছিলাম, মনে হচ্ছে যেন এক্ষুনি এই কিছুক্ষণ পরে আমি মারা যাব, এরকম ভীতিকর এক পরিস্থিতির মধ্যে আমাকে তারা সেদিনও আমাকে রেখেছিল। ছেড়ে দেওয়ার আগ পর্যন্ত আমি সেই ভীতিকর অবস্থার মধ্যে ছিলাম, সারা হওয়ার আগ পর্যন্ত। যাই হোক, ওখান থেকে ছাড়া পেয়ে আমি আহ, এই একটা স্বাভাবিক জীবনে আমি ফিরে আসলাম। কিন্তু স্বাভাবিক জীবনে ফিরে আসলেও আমি বুঝতে পারছি, আমি দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে দেশে একটা পরিবর্তন হয়ে আসবে। আমি জানতাম না আসলে সেখানে কি হয়েছে, দেশে কি হয়েছে আমি এটা ভিতরে থাকতে কিছু জানতাম না। কোনো তথ্য, কোনো খবর দেশে কি হয়েছে আমি জানতাম না কিছু। হাসিনার পতন ঘটেছে, হাসিনা যে পালিয়ে গেছে, তাও কোনো খবর আমি জানতে পারিনি। কিন্তু ওখান থেকে আসার পর আমি তখন আস্তে করে বুঝলাম যে দেশে একটা পরিবর্তন এসেছে, হাসিনার পতন ঘটেছে, ফ্যাসিস্ট সরকারের পতন ঘটেছে। কিন্তু আমি এও আহ দেখলাম যে সারা দেশের পরিস্থিতি কিন্তু পরিবর্তন হয়েছে দেশে। ডক্টর ইউনূসের নেতৃত্বে অন্তর্বর্তী সরকারের গঠন হয়েছে, গঠিত হয়েছে। তো কিন্তু পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামের পরিস্থিতি বদলায়নি, সেখানে আগের মতো অবস্থা রয়েছে। সেখানে সেনাবাহিনীর কর্তৃত্ব আছে, তাদের অত্যাচার নিপীড়ন আছে, তাদের সেখানে অপারেশন উত্তরের নামে সেনা শাসনের কোনো বলবৎ রয়েছে, তারা মানুষের উপর অত্যাচার নিপীড়ন আগের মতো চালিয়ে যাচ্ছে। তো আহ সারা দেশে একটা গণতান্ত্রিক পরিবেশ যে বলা হচ্ছে যে দ্বিতীয়বার দেশ স্বাধীন হয়েছে, কিন্তু প্রকৃত অর্থে দেশে একটা শান্তি ফিরে আসলেও, কিন্তু সমতলে শান্তি ফিরে আসলেও আমাদের পাহাড়ে চিটাগাং হেলতেছে এখনো পর্যন্ত সেই মুক্তি আসেনি, সেই স্বাধীনতা আসেনি, আমরা এখনো মুক্ত হয়নি সেখানে। তো সম্প্রতি অনেক ঘটনা ঘটেছে 5 তারিখের পরও। সারা দেশে ছাত্ররা যেভাবে বিভিন্ন দেয়ালে বা বিভিন্ন জায়গায় গ্রাফিটি এঁকে তাদের তাদের ভাষা প্রকাশ করছিল, আহ, ঠিক সেভাবে আমাদের পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামেও সেখানকার ছাত্রছাত্রীরা বিভিন্ন দেয়ালে দেয়ালে দেয়াল লিখন, তারপরে সেখানে গ্রাফিটি আঁকতে গিয়ে তারা সেনাবাহিনীর হামলার শিকার হয়, বাধার সম্মুখীন হয় সেনাবাহিনীর কাছ থেকে। এমন এমন সময় তারা পারমিশন নিয়েও নিতে তাদের বাধ্য করে, সেনা ক্যাম্প থেকে গ্রাফিটি আঁকতে গিয়ে সেনা ক্যাম্প থেকে পারমিশন নিয়ে তাদের ওই কাজ করতে বাধ্য করে তারা। এইসব ঘটনা আমরা দেখেছি। তারপরে সর্বশেষ আমরা দেখেছি সেখানে আরো কিছু নারী নির্যাতনের ঘটনা ঘটেছে। আমাদের পাহাড়ি নারীদের উপর শ্লীলতাহানির ঘটনা ঘটেছে, শ্লীলতাহানির চেষ্টা করা হয়েছে। আহ সর্বশেষ আমরা দেখেছি যে রাঙামাটির আহ জোড়াছড়িতে 3 চাকমা পুলিশ কনস্টেবলকে কেবলমাত্র সেখানকার সেনাবাহিনীর জোন কমান্ডার কে সেলুট না দেওয়ার কারণে তাদেরকে বেদম প্রহার করা হয়েছে, তাদের উপর শারীরিক অত্যাচার করা হয়েছে। শুধু তাই নয়, এরপরে যখন তাদেরকে খোঁজ খবর নিতে গেল, সেই থানার ওসি সহ সমস্ত স্টাফ, পুলিশের স্টাফ যখন আর্মি জোনে গিয়েছিল, তাদের উপরও তারা সেনাবাহিনী হামলা চালিয়েছে। এসব ঘটনা আমাদেরকে উদ্বিগ্ন করে। আমাদেরকে আহ, আমাদের আহ, আমাদের সেই সেনা শাসনের সেনাবাহিনীর জোন কমান্ডার কে সেলুট না দেওয়ার কারণে তাদেরকে বেদম প্রহার করা হয়েছে, তাদের উপর শারীরিক অত্যাচার করা হয়েছে। শুধু তাই নয়, এরপরে যখন তাদেরকে খোঁজ খবর নিতে গেল, সেই থানার ওসি সহ সমস্ত স্টাফ, পুলিশের স্টাফ যখন আর্মি জোনে গিয়েছিল, তাদের উপরও তারা সেনাবাহিনী হামলা চালিয়েছে। এসব ঘটনা আমাদেরকে উদ্বিগ্ন করে। আমাদেরকে আহ, আমাদের আহ, আমাদের সেই সেনা শাসনের সেখানে যে সেনা শাসন চলছে সেটা প্রমাণ করে। আর আমি এটাও এখনো আমরা বলতে পারি যে সেখানে সেনা শাসন উত্তরণের নামে এখন সেনা শাসন বলবৎ রয়েছে। তথাকথিত অপারেশন উত্তরণ এখনো চলছে, সেনাবাহিনীর সেনা শাসন। আর একই সাথে যে আহ আহ সেখানে স্বরাষ্ট্র মন্ত্রণালয় কর্তৃক অবৈধ যে গোপন নির্দেশনা, 11 দফা নির্দেশনা যে দেওয়া হয়েছে, তাও এখনো বলবৎ রয়েছে। সেখানে 11 দফা নির্দেশনার মধ্যে বলা আছে, বিশেষ করে রেস্ট্রিকশন আছে বিদেশি আসা যাওয়ার, সেখানে প্রবেশ করার ক্ষেত্রে, তারপরে মানবাধিকার কর্মী প্রবেশ করার ক্ষেত্রে বিধি নিষেধ সেখানে আছে, কিছু অনেক কিছু আছে সেই 11 দফা নির্দেশনার ভিতর। তারপরে এটা এখনো প্রত্যাহার করা হয়নি, তা এখনো সেখানে আছে। সব মিলিয়ে পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামে এখনো শান্তি ফিরে আসেনি। সেখানকার মানুষ আগের অবস্থায় রয়েছে, একটু ভয়ঙ্কর অবস্থায় রয়েছে। তো এই অবস্থায় আমি নিজেও আমি মোটেই নিরাপদ বোধ করছি না। যে আমি জানি না যে এখন এখন যদিও পরিবেশটা একটু শান্ত অবস্থায় আছে, কিন্তু আগামীকাল কি হবে, কালকে কি হবে, আমার বিশেষ করে আমি একটা আতঙ্কের মধ্যে আছি। আমি এখনো আমার পাহাড়ে যেতে ভয়, আমার হেলথ এক্সে যেতে আমার ভয় করছে। এখানে থাকতেও, আমি যেখানে থাকি না কেন, সবসময় আতঙ্কের মধ্যে আমি এখনো আছি। যে কোনো সময় তারা আমাকে আরো আহ আহ অনেক কিছু করতে পারে, এরকম ভয় আমার সবসময় আছে। যেহেতু আমার ওখানে পরিস্থিতি কোনো পাল্টায়নি, তো আমি এও দেখছি যে আমাদের এখনো অনেক বন্দী জেলের ভিতর আছে, তাদেরকে এখনো মুক্তি দেওয়া হয়নি। তাদের বিরুদ্ধে মিথ্যা মামলা দেওয়া আছে। আহ প্রায় 29 জন আমাদের নেতা কর্মী, সমর্থক সহ 29 জন নেতা কর্মী সেখানে রাঙামাটি খাগড়াছড়ি জেলে বন্দী রয়েছে। তাদেরকে এখনো মুক্তি দেওয়া হয়নি। আহ আমি দাবি জানাই যে তাদেরকে মুক্তি দেওয়া হয়। এখানে সমতলে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে বিএনপি চেয়ারপারসন খালেদা জিয়া সহ আরো কিছু ইসলামিক ফান্ডামেন্টালিস্ট, তাদেরকে বিভিন্ন আহ, মামলায় এ যাবৎ তারা আটক ছিল, জেলে বন্দী ছিল, তাদেরকেও ছেড়ে দেওয়া হয়েছে। অথবা আমাদের পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামে এখনো সেরকম দৃশ্যমান কোনো পরিবর্তন দেখছি না। যদিও ডক্টর ইউনূসের নেতৃত্বে
We're cutting it a little bit short, but Michael Chakma's ability to talk about the rights of the people of CHT is perhaps why he was kept in this horrible detention for so long. And that is one of the things that we are hoping that we will be looking at. The Bangladesh government has now set up a commission of inquiry to look into all these cases of enforced disappearances. I have two housekeeping things before we start off. One is, please do not take photographs unless only the organizers will, just for the security of the people over here. And the second thing is, one of our speakers is not feeling well, so she is not being able to join us. So just wanted to let you know that Prapti will not be speaking. And with that, I will hand over to Nusrat, who will talk to us about how it all came about.
Hello. Today I stand before you to share a deeply personal story of mine. I'm Nusrat Tabassum, a devoted coordinator of the anti-discrimination student movement in Bangladesh. My activism against injustice began early in my university life. As the quota movement emerged, I joined in with a fervent dedication, advocating for our collective rights, particularly representing women in our struggle. Under the administration of Sheikh Hasina, our peaceful movement has been met with severe repression and violence. The death of Abu Said on July 16 marked a turning point, compelling our movement to challenge the existing dictatorship. Following an internet blackout, student leaders were systematically detained. On October, sorry, on July 28 at 4:30 a.m., individuals in white attire forcibly entered my home, claiming to be members of the Detective Branch Police of Bangladesh. They confiscated my phone and detained me without a warrant, preventing me from contacting my family or legal counsel. I was blindfolded, tortured more than 4 hours, held at gunpoint, and coerced into giving a statement under threat of implicating me and my family in false charges. Despite assurance of release, I was held in DB police for nearly a week. Sometimes I even thought about suicide because of the depression. After enduring more than 32 hours of hunger strike, and I really want to mention hunger strike, it's even without water, I was finally released. Though I emerged with several injuries to my teeth, ears, and mouth, some injuries still I have to carry. This brutal crackdown has resulted in hundreds of deaths and signifies the several sacrifices Bangladesh has endured for its liberation. We are resolute in our commitment to safeguarding this freedom. The violence I experienced is part of a broader pattern of repression against dissent over the past 17 years. We are determined to prevent such brutality from recurring. As Bangladesh seeks to reform its democratic path, we call upon the international community for steadfast support in our efforts to build a just and new Bangladesh. We seek your cooperations in this critical endeavor, and this is just my story, and there are a lot of students and people in my country who also had to face such things, and I'm just here to present their story also. We just want your cooperation for our future Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nusrat. For those of you who don't know, Abu Saeed, that she talked about, was a young man who was one of the protesters. He was actually photographed holding up the Bangladesh flag, and he was standing there, sort of taunting perhaps the police officers with holding the mast of that flag, and they shot him at point blank range and killed him. And that really, he became almost the symbol of the atrocities that the state visited upon these young protesters. And Anika will tell us a little bit more about the protest.
If I'm clearly audible. Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audiences, I am Anika Tasina, a student leader and a central coordinator in the recent anti-discrimination student movement in Bangladesh. I was enlisted to be killed or disappeared if the protest was not a successful one. I stand here today as a martyr who was killed indiscriminately, alongside the wounded students who were still in tears on hospital beds, traumatized female leaders against whom excessive force was used, detainees in the secret detention camps, politicians of Islamic politics or other opposing parties who were portrayed as militants in the world, slain journalists who dared to speak the truth, the tea workers living on tea flowers 2 times a day, the young girls killed in the border for whom the government never chose to speak, the rape victims never got justice against the politicians and business giants, and the young people, the child laborers who never seized the applicability of Child Act, and the young people who have never cast a vote in their lives. Our beloved nation, Bangladesh, iconic by name, iconic by courage, has been at a critical juncture from the colonial era. But for the last 15 years, The people have witnessed the erosion of democratic values, suppression of dissent, and rampant violations of human rights by the monstrous Sheikh Hasina regime. For 15 long years, the world has listened to what was exclusively whispered by Sheikh Hasina and her party. The representatives of Bangladesh on both national and international forums have never truly been part of the people. I beg the world to pay attention to the common people of Bangladesh. For decades, the world has been misled. Today, I stand before you to share our journey, our struggle, and our dreams for a better Bangladesh. During the recent July massacre in Bangladesh, unarmed student protesters were met with excessive lethal and semi-lethal forces by the police and Awami League cadres. More than 600 protesters were killed between July 16 to August 11. This was such a short period of time. The media was muzzled, the journalists and the children were shot dead. But the movement was not just a cry for a power change, but a call for restoration of human dignity and rule of law. The actions have left deep scars in our society, but they also ignited a fire within us, a fire that demands accountability and justice. We urge the Council to initiate a comprehensive, independent, and impartial investigation into the crimes during the movement that should include the operation of last 15 years. The perpetrators must be held accountable so that such atrocities never can be repeated. We urge the Council to cooperate with Bangladesh in bolstering its democratic institutions, assuring judiciary's independence, defending freedom of expression and movement, securing everyone's right to engage in politics without fear of reprisal are all part of this. A council mandate is an urgent call in Bangladesh that we Bangladeshis demand. Diplomatic pressure and sanctions must be applied when the government escalates from the human rights. We appeal for humanitarian assistance to support the affected by the crackdown that includes legal, psychological, financial, and medical assistance. The youths have demonstrated that we are prepared to take the lead. However, we ourselves cannot accomplish this. To make sure that our sacrifices are not in vain, we require the assistance of the world community. To sum up, I would like to remind everyone that the struggle for justice and accountability is not limited to Bangladesh. It is a global one. Let us unite in solidarity with every nation that is suffering, exclusively with the Palestinian brothers and sisters, for whom the world leaders are deaf, blind, and dumb. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anika. Very powerful. Prapti has been able to send us a video. So, oh no, okay, hasn't been able to send us a video. So then I will pass on. So then I'll pass on to to Yasmin from Amnesty International, who's been working on Bangladesh for many years.
Thanks, Meenakshi. Well, it's really good to be here. I echo everything what Meenakshi said at the beginning of the session. It is wonderful to be here and talk about Bangladesh in such a context. A couple of months ago, we never thought this is possible. But having listened to Nusrat and Anika, and having spoken to so many other students back in Bangladesh within the last couple of months, and having worked on human rights violations in Bangladesh for some time now, I also want to take this opportunity to look at human rights violations in a very holistic view. Accountability is not subjective. Accountability is not exclusive. So keeping that in mind, it is very important to ensure that the government has a transparent, efficient, and independent mechanism in place to ensure truth, justice, and accountability for human rights violations in accordance with the international standards. This has been one of our calls for many years, and currently the interim government has shown interest and taken positive steps towards it. But there is also an opportunity for the international community to step in to support this endeavor. That's why a resolution at this point would be advisable, because we also have to keep in mind that the world that Anika spoke about, the injustice anyway is a threat to justice everywhere, and the kind of experience that Nusrat spoke about, these things could happen again, because currently what we have is an interim government that is very promising, that has made positive steps, that has made promises, commitments to protect human rights. But justice, truth, accountability is not going to happen overnight. This is, we are in for the long haul. And we need the international commitment, community's commitment, to ensure that this doesn't fall short. Speaking of positive steps, of course, the interim government signed the Convention on Enforced Disappearances recently, established a commission of inquiry to look into violations. This is a very short-term setup that they have a 45-day mandate to, I believe, to give an overview of what happened from 2010 to 2024. This, again, something that we never thought could happen is happening. Very good. But I also want to reiterate, take this point across that can't also put a timestamp on human rights violations. There are also cases of human rights violations before 2010. One emblematic case is that not just Amnesty International, a lot of other human rights organizations worked on was another indigenous rights activist like Michael, who just spoke, Kalpana Chakma. So the scope is more. There has been impunity for such a long time that this is a very good starting point, but I want the international community, because the people of Bangladesh know this, interim government know this, but I want to remind the international community that we also need to observe this. We also need to provide support, assistance, monitor along the way to ensure that this meets the international standards of human rights. What these two courageous students here on the panel said, to sum it up, you need reforms in the country. I believe the government is looking into reforms. But if we look at what happened in July and August, for me personally, it's a compressed, enhanced version of human rights violations that we have seen for decades in the country. There were issues pertaining to freedom of expression, enforced disappearances, including short-term enforced disappearances. The students get picked up for sometimes 36 hours, sometimes it's 3-4 days, and then there are either arbitrary charges against them or they are being released. This has been a trend for such a long time. Another thing is group FIRs. This FIR is the first incident reports that we see in Bangladesh. That's the first complaint when you go to the police that you get. These mass FIRs have no names. You get like random 200 people in one FIR. This is again that was used against the students when they were arrested in groups. Within a few days, I think 11,000 of them were arrested. But this is again something that we saw when indigenous people were arrested in April, May. This is something that we saw government workers were arrested, protesting government workers were arrested last year. So there have been these trends happening over time that we still need to address, that we still need to hold accountable the perpetrators. Which brings me to evidence preservation. This is again something that I believe we all need to contribute to ensure that evidence preservation happens according to international standards. I believe I covered most of the points, and I want to give the floor to Kira if there are any questions. So over to Meenakshi.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. You've covered almost everything. I can't reiterate enough some of the things that Yasmin has pointed out, which is the need for security sector reform. You know, the fact is that Bangladeshis for years would not speak, not just because they had the Digital Security Act and then the Cyber Security Act did silenced critics, but because they would say that we would either be disappeared or they would be subjected to crossfire. It was what they call crossfire. It was GUM, disappearances, or crossfire, which is extrajudicial killings. So she's saying, as Nusrat is saying, thousands of people, the students are still missing. So you know, at this point of time, the need for social security reform, for security sector reform, for building institutions which have been destroyed for so long. The National Human Rights Commission doesn't function. The judiciary has been politicized. The police was politicized, which is one of the things that happened with those 200 odd unnamed people that would constantly be picked up and put into jail. Now, some of this is being replicated already. So we do need to help this government do what it is set out to do. And really, this government has already announced a lot. The expectations that this government carries are enormous, not just from these two who've lost friends and suffered themselves to win this, but for all the Bangladeshis. They also need socioeconomic reforms because the economy is going to be troubled very soon. So for member states, the huge appeal is to support Bangladesh in this journey as best as possible. And with that, I'll open to questions. I think Rory, you had the intervention.
Okay, thank you very much. Rory Mungovan, the Chief of the Asia Pacific section here at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you to the organisers for bringing us together. And a special thanks to our speakers, the student leaders who've shared with us today. It is very, very important we hear their voices, not just about what has happened these past 2-3 months, but also their ideas and aspirations for the future. The High Commissioner has been very inspired by the student movement, by the people's movement in Bangladesh, and has expressed his solidarity and support for the people, has raised his voice at a number of critical times during the recent violence, and sees this as a very historic opportunity to address many of the long-standing issues that the office and the human rights mechanisms have been documenting, reporting on in Bangladesh over many years, that have weakened democracy and the rule of law, that have undermined the civic space, and have also left gaps in economic, social, and cultural rights. And we hear, for instance, the developments already on the issue of enforced disappearances as an example of those long-standing concerns. High Commissioner was able to have a very positive discussion with Chief Advisor Dr. Yunus on the 14th of August. And subsequently, Dr. Yunus has invited the office to conduct an independent fact-finding of the human rights violations that have occurred between the 1st of July and the 15th of August in the context of the recent protests, but also to look at the root causes and systemic issues that have fed into this, and to make recommendations for the future. And I'm pleased to say that that fact-finding team has is arriving in Bangladesh today, in fact, beginning its work this week, and will be collecting information on the ground over the next several weeks, and we hope to finalize that report within, certainly by November. In the meantime, we've also been discussing with the interim government, with the student leaders, with other parts of the civil society, some of the other areas that OHHR could assist. Some of them have been mentioned very much by the panel today: judicial reform, law enforcement reform, reform to some of the laws that have been curtailing the civic space, some of the economic, social, and cultural rights issues. But of course, also this broader question of accountability and dealing with the past. And while, of course, the initial focus is very much on what has happened these past months, I think we all recognize there needs to be a broader, inclusive process that ultimately we hope will lead to a sense of national healing and reconciliation. But we will be very committed. High Commissioner is giving this his highest priority. We will be very committed as an office to support the interim government, people of Bangladesh, in this really important journey. And we hope that this will be the basis, for a longer term human rights program and presence and work in Bangladesh. Thank you again, and thanks especially to our student speakers for their, and to Michael for his testimony this morning.
Thanks so much, Rory. Any other member states? Any intervention? There's another student in the audience. I just wondered, Mekmuller, if you want to speak very briefly about your experience, you have to put on the mic.
Thank you. I'd like to start by remembering all our martyrs of the July uprising. Just like to add another point to the discussion that has already taken place. One of the most important aspects that was discussed during the July uprising was about the police force in Bangladesh and how it acts. I think there needs to be long-term structural adjustments and reforms to the police, because the government has sort of changed the dresses of the police, the uniform of the police, but as we all understand, that's very ornamentary. I'd like to tell you that there's already been incidents of custodial deaths, even with the government that is committed to stopping custodial deaths and all forms of human rights abuses. Now, what that tells us is even if the government wants to, because the structure is as such, because the police only knows this form of investigation, that we need certain structural changes to ensure that the police does not go on to brutalize people just for being protesters. So I think there's a huge need for police reform, and I think the international community should constructively criticize and help the government to bring about those changes. Unless that happens, we will see another July, in 5, 10, 20 years' time. So I think that needs to be stopped.
So much. I just wanted to, one issue that we've not really talked about a lot, but I just wanted to flag is also that Bangladesh continues to host 1 million Rohingya refugees, and there are more waiting at the borders. It is something that Bangladesh needs support on. These are people that are fighting, renewed fighting in Rakhine State. So just wanted to flag that and draw attention to all of you to that issue as well. And any other questions? Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to the organizers for putting together this program. I think that we've all been watching the developments in Bangladesh with great interest and admiration for the commitment of the students and the commitment of the interim government to seek accountability and to seek reform. We're also supportive of the active role that the Office of the High Commissioner has played to this point, and appreciate their work and their coordination. I'd be interested in hearing a little more from our panelists. You've talked about sort of the need to sustain reforms, to sustain momentum and progress to meet these goals. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about what you see as happening in the in the months ahead on that front, the commitments the interim government has made, and maybe where you're most concerned about there being gaps or backsliding. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the question. So, as we have seen in the last 15 years that the Sheikh Hasina and her party has politicized every institution of the government, including the judiciary, the police, and in fact, they have oppressed the NGOs and the leaders from different, having different views. But what is the real scenario in Bangladesh presently is that the whole police sector, that is the strength of the government, is I guess they are facing so many backlashes from the people as they have killed so many students brutally. So they are not actually working and they are not yet reformed, as we need more time to reform the police sector. But the government is trying to get them in their work. But in the meantime, the situation is escalating and mob justice is going on in Bangladesh. So I guess the interim government needs more time to reform it, but actually we urge the world community to have an alert eye on Bangladesh until it is totally reformed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anika. Thank you so much. Nusrat, do you want to add something?
Well, I just want to add one another things that we need to reform a lot of things in Bangladesh, including obviously the security concern, the security and force, law and force, and obviously the act. But we also need the primary things of the reformation, like economic credibility and economic structure. Because in Awami regime, there are so many corrupted person was nourished by Sheikh Hasina and his family and his party. So Bangladesh, right now Bangladesh has faced so many backlash, and one of the biggest reason is economic weakness. Because if a country has to face so many corruption, then it's very natural that economic system become weak. So law and force and act judicial system is our first priority. But in next 1 month, we also looking forward our economic structural reformation and economic credibility and reputation also, because I know that you guys are knowing that Bangladesh economic credibility are questioning right now, and because of the internet blackout, our IT sector just devastated. Sheikh Hasina done so many things just to secure his chair, secure her chair, but she didn't think about our country. I don't think this is the right place or not, but Sheikh Hasina does not love our country. She has no headache about what Bangladesh has to going through months and years. So I think interim government has to do a lot of reformation, but there will be a priority list, and the priority list is law and act, law enforcement, our economic structure, and then we can looking for the other things. So if you want to ask the first priority and what we are looking forward in next 1 month, then these are the things we are looking forward. Thank you.
I'd like to come in as well.
One second, Anika wants to just add.
I just want to add one point. You have seen the infrastructural development of Bangladesh. You have seen Bangladesh is going so far. Bangladesh is having its flag in different prestigious organizations, but they were all what was shown. to you. Yes, visual development. You have not seen the corruption inside our country. You have not seen the daily lifestyle of our people. So the real scenario is very different. Please have a look. Thank you.
Just to say that one of the things that they're both talking about is the level of corruption, and that is to a little bit goes to the diminishing of independent institutions, because when the corrupt were investigated, it was politically motivated. The Corruption Commission, therefore, is no longer trusted because we no longer know whether those cases were legitimate cases or were being targeted, or people were being targeted because they were supporters of the opposition and so on. So just trust in institutions, I suppose that is what resonates from both of them, that building those institutions very quickly so that people can trust them to be non-partisan, to not be biased, would perhaps be a very, very important thing. But yes, Yasmin, please add.
Thanks, Meenakshi. Your summary is basically what I wanted to say as well. Yes, there's a priority list of reforms, but then there was a synergy among these issues. The police, the judiciary, the corruption, and the reforms should happen in equal pace as well. Otherwise, you'll see imbalance in the structures, and the reforms wouldn't give the results that we are looking for. But I also wanted to bring in the whole matter of death penalty here. I think that's another place that the international community should be alert, should pay attention to, because even our calls for justice, I understand Professor Yunus has invited Sheikh Hasina to come back to Bangladesh to face trial. And there are already cases against her under the International Crimes Tribunal of Bangladesh. But the problem, one main problem that there is the death penalty. There has to be a moratorium keeping in mind of abolishing death penalty, but which brings me to another issue of the gaps that you asked about the scope of the interim government. We're not 100% clear what the government is constitutionally capable of doing and what they are not doing, they can't do at this point. We have other calls as well. Like, of course, there are laws like the Cybersecurity Act and the Digital Security Act that we've been campaigning against for such a long time. The cases filed under the Act, though the Act is now repealed, are still ongoing. These people are still on trial simply for exercising their right to freedom of expression. While all of these in mind, that one thing that we have to be alert about, I go back to my main point that I was talking about earlier, why the international community should pay attention is that there is so much of uncertainty amidst this promising setup that we have right now.
Thanks, Yasmin. Yes, you have a question, and after that, and also Prapti's video message has come. So we have 10 minutes. So, sir, if you can be short.
Boris Engelson, a journalist freelance. For people who were born after the independence of Bangladesh, even in among politically engaged people, we know little about Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not a large country, although by population it is, I think, larger than Russia or Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. What we hear about Bangladesh mostly is the Rana Plaza affair, which comes back regularly. And personally, my source of information is today's roundtable. That's why I'm attending, and I take at face value and with great emotion of what I heard. But also, very recently, I think it was at the Festival of Film on Human Rights, we had a 3-hour-long film, Mujib, about the father of that monstrous, horrendous dictator, Sheikh Hasina, and how she escaped being massacred then. And also I have watched documentaries about the rampant civil war between fundamentalist Muslim parties and secular, among else in the Rohingya refugee camps. So for me, it's difficult to put together these three different views, and that's why the comment of the Amnesty International lady was so embarrassed. So I like to know to put things in a very simple question, for instance, are there any affiliation ideologically, politically between some parties supporting the revolt against Sheikh Hasina and those who murdered her father 50 years back? That's one way to. And another question, you said take no photo. I complied, I quite understand, but your names is here, and I think each of you has a 1 meter long file in the Bangladesh ministry. So I don't see the rationale for that. But
thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I'm sure that if we go down the rabbit hole of the conspiracies, we can arrive at wherever we arrived. Yeah, but thank you.
Is he asking that?
No, chill.
violence in Bangladesh was not unleashed from the government, from what I can read.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. We will get to that. I just wanted to, one of the things that we did not mention earlier is that the fact-finding mission, the OHCHR fact-finding mission has already arrived in Bangladesh. And we, of course, are expecting the Bangladesh government to act on the number of recommendations that we hope will be made by this fact-finding mission, which will probably give some guidance to us, some of the reforms that we want to see happening later. When they make their closing statements, they can address your question as well. But anyone else have any questions? Should we play the video? Not ready as yet. So we have 5 minutes. You wanted to say something quickly?
Just to answer the question the gentleman asked previously, I think the biggest challenge now is a balancing act that the Bangladesh government has to sort of do, because at one hand you have a police force which has no credibility among the people, therefore it's very scared to even investigate, general crimes such as rape, crimes such as desecration of temples, shrines, and other sort of religious institutions, because they're so afraid of that, because they're so afraid of repercussions, that they are not doing it. But at the same time, these crimes are being committed because the antisocial elements know that there is no police to sort of investigate their crimes. So I think the government has to sort of get a balancing act of reforming the police so they do not perform atrocities, but at the same time so that they can do their job. And I think the international community has a very important role in this case to help the government with structural reforms and suggestions that ensure that that balance can be struck.
I think we should start making closing remarks now. We have 5 minutes. So should we go backward? Yes, Yasmin, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll make it quick because I also want to make sure that these two ladies get their fair share. To sum up, there's a very limited, unique opportunity right now for the Bangladeshi government to address human rights violations and for the international community to support them. This issue is, like I said, there's no timestamp for human rights violations. So we're looking at like a sea of issues to deal with at a very short time. So domestic investigations, international investigations, we are open for options, and I think international community should step up at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anika?
Okay. So I just want to say one thing, that I'm just lucky to sit here. Maybe I was supposed to be killed or disappeared, and there are so many innocent people, so many students, so many journalists, children, they were killed indiscriminately. So the perpetrators must be held accountable, and the world community must be alert, the council must be alert. So please have a look to Bangladesh, and please always listen to the common people. We have a lot to say to the international communities. Thank you.
Nusrat?
I just add one thing with Anika. Please have a look to Bangladesh, but obviously with a helpful side. We want your assistance, we want your help, and listen to common people. And interim government, we're really looking forward the interim government right now in Bangladesh take the charge, we want you guys help the government, but obviously with a look like a monetization that is very important, because as Meg Mollar mentioned, we don't want to see another July in 10 or 20 or 13 years. After 1971, people doesn't get the chance to practice democratical rights. Now we want to make that space for our country. So we want your support, but with a look, helpful side. Thank you.
So we're nearly at time. I just wanted to close to flag one thing that we did not cover, which was the rights of Hindus and other minorities and what happened during and that was what Prapti was supposed to speak on, but she wasn't able to speak. So one of the things that we do want to address, and I suppose that goes back to your question as well, sir, which is that Bangladesh has had a complicated history. It has had various political movements. At each time, there have been heroes. Some have fallen. Some have been found to have feet of clay. But in all of this, what happened post-August, after the Sheikh Hasina government fell, was that there was a lot of anger and a lot of reprisal, including groups that the Hindu community that was targeted, that showed up at the borders of India.
Also false allegation.
And yes, there were also allegations I'm afraid there was also a social media campaign that exaggerated these attacks, which also led to many more differences within Bangladesh community. So for everybody concerned, to make Bangladesh a secure country that has its political opinions, of course, but practiced peacefully, there needs to be international support at every level possible. And so we do hope that we can have all your support, and these two can have all your support going forward. So thank you. I'll close with that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elisa